What if the biggest mistake of your life turned out to be the one thing that saved you? When a struggling single dad accidentally sends his grieving daughter to the wrong summer camp, he expects complaints, chaos, or at best, a refund. Instead, she returns transformed, smiling again, carrying stories of a mysterious woman who changed everything. And when he follows her footsteps back to the woods, he finds not just the camp, but the one person who might heal them both. This is a story about second chances, quiet miracles, and the kind of love that doesn't arrive with fireworks, but stays for good. If you believe in the power of kindness, hope, and stories that touch the heart, don't forget to subscribe and join us on this unforgettable journey. Now, let's begin. The Kindness Camp. The application form had been open on Graham Adler's laptop for 3 days, blinking in the corner of his cluttered screen like a guilt trip he hadn't signed up for. Summer camp. Just the thought made his stomach tighten. He rubbed his temples, staring at the digital flyer. STEM ahead, a camp for future coders. It promised robotics, coding, and science adventures. Everything his late wife would have chosen for Maisie. Everything he had no clue about. But it was structured, safe, predictable. That had to count for something. He glanced toward the living room. Maisie, 10 years old and far too quiet for her age, sat curled up with a book, her blonde hair half falling into her cereal bowl. Her legs dangled off the couch like she didn't belong to the world around her, and in many ways she didn't. Not since June last year. Graham's throat tightened. He turned back to the screen, clicked submit, and shut the laptop with a satisfying snap. It wasn't until 3 days later, when the welcome packet arrived in the mail, that Graham realized he'd made a mistake. Not STEM Ahead, Kindred Camp. He read the brochure twice, thinking maybe it was a sponsorship name or a sub-program. It wasn't. This camp didn't offer coding or robotics. It offered forest breathing, compassion circles, and something called a memory grove. It used phrases like healing through connection and grief-informed programming. The welcome letter was handwritten and signed, with gentle hope, Wren Callahan. Graham stared at the signature like it had insulted him. What kind of camp sends handwritten letters? Maisie walked into the kitchen and picked up the envelope. Is that for me? He hesitated. It was supposed to be a science camp. She pulled out the brochure and scanned the pictures. Children sitting in hammocks, painting rocks, writing letters to someone off-frame. Her eyes lit up, just a flicker. I like trees, she said softly. Graham frowned. Maisie, this isn't robotics. This is... He paused, flipping through pages filled with images of barefoot kids planting wildflowers. It's feelings, and hugging, and pine cones. Maisie looked up. Can I go? He blinked. You want to? She shrugged. It looks quiet. That stopped him. She hadn't said she wanted anything in months. Not new shoes, not screen time, not even dessert. You really want to go to this kindred place? He asked. She nodded once. Mom liked trees too. And that was it, that one line. They arrived at Kindred Camp 2 weeks later, tucked away in a pine-shaded valley 2 hours north of Seattle. The dirt road leading to the entrance was so narrow, Graham had to reverse twice to let a Subaru pass. His truck looked absurd among the rows of hybrids and minivans. A woman in her late 30s stood under a string of handmade paper lanterns, waving at new arrivals. She had curly auburn hair pulled into a loose braid, freckles across her nose, and wore a sun-faded shirt that read, "Kindness is contagious." "Welcome to Kindred," she called warmly. "You must be Maisie." Maisie nodded shyly and half hid behind Graham. He extended a hand out of reflex. "I'm Graham Adler, her dad." She shook it gently. "Wren Callahan. I run the emotional wellness programming here." Of course she does, Graham thought. Her voice was like warm honey in a cold cup. Don't worry, she added, noting his skeptical expression. We don't force anyone to sing Kumbaya. Maisie cracked a smile at that. The check-in process was seamless, which somehow made Graham feel worse. He'd expected chaos, tears, a last-minute change of heart. But Maisie rolled her suitcase down the gravel path like she belonged here. The camp had that effect. It was absurdly peaceful. Birds chirped. Wind moved through tall pines like breath. No one was shouting. No one was rushing. When Maisie spotted a girl showing others how to make flower crowns near the pond, she paused. Then she looked at him and said, "You can go now, Dad." Graham blinked. Already? Maisie nodded, gripping her little backpack. You'll pick me up next Friday, right? He crouched down. Of course I will. She leaned in, kissed his cheek, and added, softly, Don't forget to smile sometimes. I miss it. That broke him. He waved goodbye and turned before she could see the tears prickling behind his eyes. As he reached his truck, Wren was there again, leaning casually against the fence. She's a remarkable kid, she said. Graham gave a half smile. She lost her mom last summer. I thought so, Wren said quietly. A lot of our campers have that look, like they're still listening for footsteps that won't come. He looked at her then, really looked. There was no pity in her eyes, only understanding. I didn't mean to sign her up here, he admitted. It was a mistake. Some of the best things are, she said with a soft smile. We've built this place on those. Graham didn't know why, but he lingered another 5 minutes before getting in the truck. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke, and something else he hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. Wren Callahan had long ago learned that the real magic of Kindred Camp wasn't in the pine trees or the fresh air. It was in the silences. The kinds of silences that weren't empty, but full of ache, of memory, of kids too young to grieve, and parents too tired to admit they were grieving too. That morning, as she moved through the check-in crowd with her clipboard and easy smile, Wren felt the subtle shift in the wind that always came with the first day of camp, a mix of anticipation and invisible weight. The unspoken question every child seemed to bring. Will I be okay here? And then there was Maisie. Wren had noticed her immediately. Her quiet posture, the way she scanned the campgrounds like a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. But she also noticed how the girl's hand remained steady in her father's. No tight grip, no panic, just presence. A bond, frayed, but not broken. And then there was the father. Graham Adler had the look of a man who'd stopped looking. Not just at camp brochures or calendars, but at people. His expression was polite, distant. The kind of man who thought silence was strength and didn't know what to do with kindness when it showed up in a sun-faded t-shirt and sandals. But when Maisie kissed his cheek and whispered something that made his shoulders cave in just slightly, Wren knew. They were both trying. That was enough. By late afternoon, the camp had settled into its rhythm. Luggage found cabins, kids found snacks, and counselors gently nudged even the most introverted toward watercolor kits and rope swings. Wren sat at her usual table outside the main lodge, a thermos of peppermint tea in hand, when she noticed Maisie again, perched on a wooden bench under the dogwood tree, sketching in a small notebook. Alone. Content. Nearby, a boy named Leo, a sweet, nonverbal 9-year-old who only communicated through laminated flashcards, approached with his counselor. His card read, "Can I sit next to you?" Maisie read it, smiled, and scooted over without a word. That moment, Wren thought, was the kind of thing no curriculum could teach. Across town, Graham sat in the driveway of their home in Bellevue, the truck engine still running. He hadn't planned to feel this displaced. The house felt emptier than usual. Not just quiet, but hollow. The absence of Maisie's presence was like a missing tooth he couldn't stop tonguing. He walked into the living room, looked at her blanket on the couch, and then turned right around and walked back out. Dinner was microwave soup. He ate half, then poured the rest down the sink. He turned on the TV, scrolled through shows he didn't care about, then finally opened his laptop. Just to look, he told himself. He typed in Kindred Camp and clicked on the website. It was simple. Hand-drawn icons, soft colors, a banner that read, "Where healing grows in the wild." He clicked on Our Team. Ren's photo was there, smiling beneath a canopy of trees, barefoot and holding a clipboard. Ren Callahan, Emotional Wellness Director, former palliative care nurse, grief-informed specialist, believer in wildflowers and second chances. He read it 3 times, then closed the laptop. Wildflowers and second chances? He didn't believe in either. Back at Kindred, dinner was a lively affair. Children sat at long wooden tables beneath string lights, passing baskets of cornbread and bowls of baked chili. The air buzzed with stories, clinking spoons and shy laughter. Maisie sat with Leo and 2 other girls. She hadn't spoken much, but her eyes were open wider than they had been in weeks. She noticed things. The woven napkin holders, the scent of lavender in the butter, the way Leo's counselor tapped twice when food arrived so he'd know it was time to eat. Across the lodge, Ren watched discreetly. Her job wasn't to hover, it was to hold space, and Maisie was unfolding, slowly. After dinner, the children gathered around a bonfire for the first kindness circle. It wasn't mandatory, just gently encouraged. They passed a carved wooden stone shaped like a heart, and whoever held it could say something kind they'd noticed that day. When it reached Maisie, she hesitated. Ren was about to step in when Maisie spoke, barely above a whisper. "Leo let me borrow his green pencil," she said. "It was the exact color I needed for the moss." The other kids nodded, and Leo beamed. No one clapped, no one forced praise. They simply moved on, and Ren felt something shift. That night, in her small cabin tucked behind the craft barn, Ren lit a single candle and opened the worn leather journal she'd been keeping since the first summer of Kindred. Not for data, not for staff reports, but for memory. She wrote, Maisie Adler, tree sketcher, quiet strength. Her father, guarded, tired, but present. Feels like they're both waiting for permission to heal. She paused, pen in midair, then added, "Keep an eye on this one. Maybe start with dogwood." Graham lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, spinning shadows across his walls. He thought of the campfire, of Maisie's whisper, "Don't forget to smile sometimes." I miss it. He didn't smile, but he did close his eyes. And for the first time in a long while, he let the silence stay. Graham hadn't meant to return to Kindred so soon. He told himself it was logistical, practical. He wanted to double-check Maisie's meds made it into the right hands, confirm her sleeping arrangement, and make sure the place wasn't too strange. After all, there were no surveillance cameras, no digital check-ins, no Wi-Fi, no screens, just handwritten signs and counselors who wore beaded bracelets and used words like intentional space. It was unsettling, but truthfully, he couldn't get that woman's voice out of his head. We've built this place on mistakes. It was too honest, too disarming, and it had stayed with him like the scent of wood smoke on a jacket, subtle but impossible to ignore. He arrived late in the afternoon, unannounced. The gravel crunched under his boots as he stepped onto the main path, greeted only by the occasional warble of birds and the distant laughter of children somewhere beyond the trees. He found Ren by the central fire pit, stacking logs in preparation for that evening's storytelling circle. She wore a denim shirt rolled to the elbows, her hair loosely tied, a pencil tucked behind one ear. Sunlight poured through the pines behind her, haloing her in a kind of accidental grace. She looked up, surprised but not displeased. "Mr. Adler," she said, brushing her hands on her jeans. "Back so soon?" He cleared his throat. "Graham's fine. I just figured I should make sure everything's squared away with Maisie." "She's doing beautifully," Wren said. "You'd be proud." "I'm always proud," he replied, a bit too quickly, then softened. "I just don't always know what I'm doing." Wren smiled in that slow, unhurried way of people who understood pain intimately. "Well," she said, gesturing toward a bench near the fire, "I've found most people here don't. That's why they come." They sat, a polite space between them, and listened to the sound of the wind moving through pine needles. Wren reached down, picked up a twig, and snapped it absently between her fingers. "I used to be a nurse," she said after a long pause. "In palliative care." Graham turned to her. "End of life?" She nodded. 5 years. Then I stopped." "Why?" She considered for a moment. "You can only hold so many hands as they go. Before you realize, no one ever taught you what to do after. I was good at the going part, not so good at the staying. That's honest. I don't do much pretending anymore," she said simply. Graham leaned forward, elbows on knees. "My wife, Lena, she was diagnosed 2 years ago. Pancreatic. We fought. Chemo, trials, more chemo, and then one day, fighting felt crueler than stopping, so we stopped." Wren didn't flinch, didn't rush to say something comforting. She just let his words settle like ash. "Maisie was 8 then," Graham continued. "She watched it all, but she never cried, not once, not even at the funeral. She was probably protecting you." The words hit harder than he expected. "You think so?" "I've seen it before," Wren said. "Children who stay strong for their parents, because no one ever tells them it's okay to fall apart." He swallowed. "She's stronger than I am." Wren smiled again, gentler this time. "Maybe, or maybe she's just waiting for you to go first." A silence followed, the kind that isn't awkward but sacred, like the stillness of a chapel when no one's speaking but everyone's praying. In the distance, a bell rang softly. "Evening circle," Wren said, standing. "You're welcome to stay. There's no pressure to speak." Graham hesitated. "Do the parents come?" "Sometimes, when they're brave." He looked at her. "Do I strike you as brave?" "No," she said, matter of fact. "But I think you're tired of being afraid." The fire crackled low as campers and staff gathered in a loose ring around it, each person wrapped in a blanket or sitting cross-legged on old cushions. Graham stood toward the back, half in shadow. Maisie sat across the circle with Leo, their heads close as they whispered about something on her sketchpad. Wren stood to speak. "Tonight we're telling stories," she said. "Not big stories, not perfect ones, just the kind that live inside us, waiting to be named." She looked around the circle. "I'll start." Wren shared a story about a boy named Jack, age 7, who had wanted to be a firefighter. He'd passed away from leukemia, and in his final days had asked her, his nurse, to teach him how to make s'mores in his hospital room. "So we did," she said. "With a candle and a coat hanger and a bar of chocolate we weren't supposed to have." The circle laughed gently, and afterward, when he was drifting off, he whispered, "You can be part of my family now." She looked down at the flames. I still remember how that marshmallow tasted. It tasted like permission. No one spoke for a long moment. Then the next child began. Graham didn't speak, but he listened. Really listened. And when it was over and the circle dispersed, Maisie crossed the clearing and took his hand. Just took it. no words. He felt the smallest squeeze. It was nothing. It was everything. The next morning brought a fog that settled low between the pines, like the forest itself was taking a deep breath before speaking. Graham hadn't planned to stay the night, but after the fire circle, something inside him refused to leave. He told himself it was for Maisie, that she might need him, that maybe he could help, but the truth was simpler. He needed this. He needed the quiet, the fire, the strangers who spoke more truth in an hour than he had in a year. He needed the space to feel without apologizing for it. And so he stayed. At breakfast, Maisie sat across from Leo, quietly eating oatmeal while sketching in her notebook. Graham joined her at the long wooden table, unsure if he'd be welcome. She glanced up, her spoon midair, and offered him the smallest of smiles. "You stayed?" "I did." "Did you sleep in a bunk?" "Sort of. Wren found me a spare cot in the staff cabin." Maisie nodded, then turned the page in her sketchbook. On it was a rough outline of the fire circle from the night before. Glowing embers, soft outlines of people, and a shadowy figure at the back with a familiar slouch. Graham blinked. "Is that me?" Maisie shrugged. "You looked kind of lonely." He cleared his throat. "I was listening." "I know," she said. "That's why I drew you there." Later that day, Wren led the camp in one of its most sacred activities, letters to the sky. Campers were given quiet time, no talking, no group work, to sit with pen and paper and write a letter to someone they missed, someone gone, someone whose absence still made the world feel lopsided. Some wrote to parents, others to siblings, grandparents, even pets. The only rule was, be honest. Wren explained it gently. You don't have to read it, you don't have to share it, but you do have to write it like they're still listening. Graham stood at the edge of the outdoor gathering space, watching as the children spread out under trees, beside the lake, or in hammocks strung between cabins. Maisie chose the foot of the oldest pine tree on the property, one Wren called the listening tree. She sat cross-legged in the moss, letter in her lap, pencil unmoving for a long time. Graham wanted to look away, but he didn't. Wren approached him quietly. She carried a leather satchel filled with paper, pencils, and tissues. You don't have to write one, she said. I wasn't planning to. She tilted her head. That's usually a sign you should. He offered a dry smile. I've already said goodbye too many times. Wren didn't argue. She simply handed him a folded sheet of paper and walked away. He didn't sit under a tree. He sat on the cabin steps, paper on his knee, pencil in hand, and stared. For 20 minutes, nothing came. Then, slowly, painfully, he began. Dear Lena, Maisie drew me last night at the fire. She said I looked lonely. I guess I did. I keep waiting for the grief to go somewhere, to drain out or fade, but it just keeps reshaping itself. It sits in the corners of her room, in your handwriting on recipe cards, in the way I don't know how to braid her hair or answer her silence. You would have loved this place. Trees and messy feelings and kids who make you want to try harder. Maisie's smiling more here. She made a friend. She's still quiet, but it's not the brittle kind. It's the kind that listens, like you used to. I don't know what I'm doing, but I think maybe that's okay now. Lava. He stared at the letter for a long time, and then, without planning it, he folded it in thirds, looked up at the pale morning sky, and whispered, Here. He let the wind carry the words. That evening, the camp held a quiet ceremony by the lake. The sun had already dipped below the treetops, casting gold across the water's surface. Campers placed their folded letters in small wooden boats, each one carved by past campers, lovingly decorated with names and stars and swirling patterns. The boats were pushed gently into the lake,